Welcome. Thank you for joining us for the MP Wired for HR webinar, Navigating Pay Transparency, Adapting to Evolving Requirements. I'm Lauren Corrigan, Marketing Manager here at MP. For those of you joining us on a webinar for the first time, MP combines cutting-edge user-friendly HCM software with proactive white glove customer support, recruitment process outsourcing, and HR services that keep business leaders abreast of the latest HR updates and compliance requirements. I am thrilled to introduce your expert for today's webinar, Meg Lavastri and Mary Jane Stewart. Mary Jane is an HR advisor at MP. She provides HR support to businesses in a variety of industries. Meg is also an HR advisor at MP. Combined, they have over 50 years of HR experience, providing a strategic and tactical support to leaders of organizations in various aspects of HR. Their specialties include organizational and policy development, performance management, employee relations, compliance, compensation, training, and other related HR areas. There's really nothing they can't do. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started here today. If you would like to submit a question during the program, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. We will also be sending out the recording and presentation slides after the webinar. Thank you, everyone. Now over to Meg.
Thank you so much, Lauren, and welcome everybody. We're so excited to be here today to talk about pay transparency. Just another housekeeping thing. This training is intended for educational and informational purposes, and we know you're going to learn a lot today. It's going to be very informative, but we are not attorneys, so any of the information that you hear today should not be construed as legal advice. But let's jump right in. So we're going to hit on a few topics today. We're going to start with an overview of what even is pay transparency. Then we're going to talk about some of the legal considerations and then dive into the steps that we think you should take as these new laws are being passed. And so we have a lot to discuss, so let's dive right in. First, let's talk about what pay transparency even is. So, pay transparency refers to the practice of openly sharing information about employee compensation within an organization. These laws, they're going to be unique from state to state. But as a general rule, they typically are going to involve one or both of the following. So, requiring employers to disclose pay information to job applicants and or requiring employers not to restrict employees from requesting or sharing compensation and or benefit information. So in some states like Nevada, for instance, companies are required to disclose salary ranges to any applicant that they interview. On the other hand, some states only require salary disclosure upon an applicant's request. And then there's also some states like Colorado that are going to require that all employment benefits offered for the job, including healthcare, retirement, PTO, those are also included. So, as you can already tell, and we'll talk about more of these as we go on, the laws are variable and they are changing. As a new state comes in, they may find something new to, to pop in there as well. So, today we're going to give you an overview of some of these laws and how to stay best compliant. So, and for your MPHR partner, for those who do utilize our services, can also be a really, really important resource in helping to revamp your strategy and also keep you informed about this ever-changing landscape of pay transparency. So instead of diving right into the scary stuff, I did want to kick things off by discussing some of the benefits of pay transparency. So while, on the surface, it can sometimes feel a bit like a drag, there's definitely some benefits to jumping into this and doing it correctly. There's absolutely increased engagement and retention. It helps promote your company's fair wage practices, and it absolutely will improve performance. And these are all things we want to see as leaders, right? So to start, I want to talk about retention and attraction. Excuse me, getting over the flu, so I might cough a little bit, but so I do want to talk about retention and attraction first. So this has been such a significant issue for all companies spanning over all industries, especially in these last, 5 years in particular. I know that when I was in in-house HR, I would have absolutely tried anything to improve both of these things. So when employers communicate how pay is determined, why it's competitive to the market, and how an employee can progress through their pay scales, PayScale noted in its report that improving fair pay perception can reduce intent to leave by 30%. Transparent pay practices can help attract and retain talented employees also. So Prospective candidates are more likely to be interested in organizations that prioritize fair and equitable compensation practices. So, current employees are also less likely to seek opportunities elsewhere if they perceive fairness in the pay decisions that you're making. A SHRM study found in SHRM is the Society for Human Resources Management that 70% of organizations that list pay ranges on their job postings say that having done that has led to more people applying to their postings. Pay transparency can also influence applicant behavior. So, in that same SHRM study, 82% of US workers are more likely to consider applying to a job if the pay range was listed in that job posting. So overall, there is a ton of benefit in providing this information up front. Administratively, we also know that's kind of the dreaded question during your interview process. So it's one less question you need to focus on in an interview because your applicant already has the answer. The next benefit is increased trust and engagement. And transparency can absolutely help build those things. When employees have a clear understanding of how their pay is determined and believe that that process is fair, they're more likely to feel valued and engaged. So, this in turn can boost morale, productivity, and overall job satisfaction. Now, in the absence of pay transparency, employees may engage in more speculation or rumors about pay disparities. This can then lead to a toxic work environment and decreased morale. So, transparency helps dispel any rumors and fosters a much more positive workplace culture. From that same SHRM study that I mentioned earlier, 73% of US workers said that they're more likely to trust organizations that provide pay ranges and job postings than ones that don't. Well, we're all aware that, the interview starts the moment that person views your job ad. Now it's absolutely more important than ever. Transparent pay practices often require better communication between managers and employees. So, in turn, this can foster more open and honest conversations about performance, expectations, and career growth, which lead to improved engagement and development opportunities. So, in a transparent company, employees know exactly why they are paid what they are paid. This also means that they know how they can move up in the pay scale. So, they're likely to put in that extra effort to produce higher quality work, improve their metrics, and maybe even learn new skills to enhance their job and showcase their performance. Transparency also provides employees with a much clearer understanding of how their compensation is determined. So, this understanding, like we kind of mentioned earlier, can reduce feelings of confusion or frustration around pay and lead to more informed discussions about salary and performance. So, pay transparency can actually make it easier on leaders to avoid pay discriminatory practices. Now, you don't mean to do it, but with unconscious bias at play, it can happen. And years later, sometimes we'll do audits for our clients, and it's been a lot of years since a pay scale was developed, and you have no idea how you even got to this place where you have certain classifications of people all making way more, and you don't even realize how you got there. So, when pay information is visible to employees, there's greater accountability to ensure that pay decisions are based on merit and not factors like gender, race, or other biases. So now obviously everything comes with its own set of challenges. So I thought I'd share just a quick highlight of some things that we'll be up against when implementing these changes. Now, I don't have all of the solutions here for you today, but for those of you with MPHR partners that are working with you, we are very knowledgeable in these issues and keeping up to date with them. And we absolutely have experience with these. So please feel free to reach out to us specifically with any questions or concerns that you have. But some of the challenges, just on a high level, certainly privacy concerns. This always is, one of the biggest ones. Sharing individual compensation information in those pay ranges for a job role is going to raise privacy concerns among employees. So balancing that transparency with individual privacy rights is a challenge that organizations are going to have to address. Salary compression. So, transparent pay practices may also lead to salary compression, where employees in similar roles expect equal compensation, regardless of their own individual experience or performance. So, balancing internal equity and external competitiveness can definitely be a challenge for organizations. And we recognize that. Cultural resistance. So, some people are really into this, they want to know. Some people really want to keep these things secretive. And implementing pay transparency can face resistance from managers and employees who are accustomed to more secretive or traditional pay practices. So, overcoming that resistance and those cultural barriers requires some very, very effective change management and lots of communication. And that's absolutely something your MPHR HR partner can help execute for you. Misinter mis misinterpretation and discontent. So transparent pay practices can also potentially lead to misinterpretation or discontent if employees perceive that their compensation is unfair, even if we've done everything right and the process is equitable. So addressing employee concerns and providing clear explanations becomes so crucial in maintaining trust. So, in summary, pay transparency promotes fairness, trust, and equality in organizations. And while it does offer so many benefits, it is going to present challenges that do need to be carefully managed. Organizations are increasingly recognizing the importance of pay transparency in addressing pay disparities and meeting employee expectation. Okay, so some of the legally things, pay transparency initiatives do have to comply with various laws and regulations to ensure fairness, prevent discrimination, and maintain legal compliance. So, as states continue to pass new legislation, pay transparency is going to become even more critical. So, it applies not only to the state where you're headquartered in, but may also apply to where your remote employees sit and even where they apply or even just where they view your job posting from. So this list is not all inclusive. This is not everybody, but it does give some examples of some of the states where pay transparency laws are already in effect, and it is updating quickly. My next slide will show a few more of those states that we're talking about today. So to discuss a few, California and Washington. So employers with 15 or more employees located anywhere must disclose the wage scale or salary range and a general description of all benefits and other compensation in the initial job posting. Colorado. Employers with at least one employee in the state must include the hourly rate, salary compensation, or a compensation range offered for the job in every job and promotional posting, as well as a general description of any bonuses, commissions, or other compensation offered for the job, and all employment benefits offered for the job, including healthcare, retirement, pays days off, including sick leave, parental leave, paid time off, or vacation, and any other benefit that has to be reported for federal tax purposes. So as you can see, the laws are very similar, but they are going to have differences to them that absolutely need to be paid attention to. So I spoke about pay scale in a previous slide, and it's one of the main highlights of most pay transparency laws. So pay scale is defined as the salary or hourly wage range that the employer reasonably expects to pay for the position. Later on in the presentation, we're going to discuss the steps to best determine your pay scale. So that will be coming towards the end. This is a list of states and localities that have adopted laws that require providing applicants or employees the pay scale for a role, either on the job posting, during employment, or upon request. What's kind of wild is that we did this presentation back in, I think it was August of 2024, and this list has updated by 6 states since then. So laws in this world are getting passed very quickly. One of the newest ones to pop in is New Jersey, which will be effective in June 1st of this year. So we are going to highlight Massachusetts. There are a lot of Massachusetts companies here that have registered for today, so we do want to highlight this one. It is one of the newer ones that has popped in for this year. So on July 31st of 2024, Governor Healy in Massachusetts signed a pay transparency bill into law that does require certain Massachusetts employers to take action towards pay transparency. So the first part of the law says that on February 1st, 2025, most Massachusetts employers with 100 or more employees in Massachusetts had to submit a wage data report to the Commonwealth. So, for those of you who are in Massachusetts, this did happen as of February 1st, 2025. If you have not done it yet, please reach out to your MPHR partner to help you do that. Hopefully, the portal is still open, but that did need to be done as of February 1st, 2025. We did note going through this process for the first time this year that it was 100 employees in Massachusetts did have to do this. One other note is that EEO and pay data will be submitted annually for purposes of the public reporting by the Massachusetts Department of Labor. And we did get further clarification that you can use the prior year's EEO report to submit for this. So that was a nice little bit of information that helped make it a little bit easier for this year. So, for those who had done it this year, you'll be able to use that data now moving forward. But for this year, you were able to use the prior year's EEO report for that. And if there is anyone on the call today that is listening from California, you're actually very familiar with this already. But now who has for a while now had to do pay data reporting as well. So now if you do have employees and 100 employees in Massachusetts as well, you're going to have to do that same thing. And the second part of the law says that beginning on October 29th, 2025, Massachusetts employers with 25 or more employees in Massachusetts will be required to post the pay range for a particular position on all job postings, disclose the pay range for a position to existing employees who are offered a promotion or transfer, and upon request, provide the pay range for a particular position to an employee holding the position or to an applicant for the position. So the date did recently change. It was earlier in the year. It has recently changed to October 29th, 2025. So make sure to note that. And so it is specific, and this law does lay out what needs to be done. So of course, we are keeping an eye on that, and we will continue to keep learning more as that deadline gets closer. Hopefully it doesn't get, well, maybe it'll get pushed again. We never know, but we will be keeping an eye on that. So your MP HR partner will help guide you through these requirements as you're getting closer, or if that date changes, we will be sending out communication about that. So what is considered a job posting or advertisement? As you can see from a few of these examples, each state has a similar, but some have a slightly different explanation of what job posting means to them. Some include third parties, some don't. So it will be extremely important that you read through the regulations with a fine-tooth comb to understand all of the nuances that they bring. And these here are just a few examples that in California, any job posting, not defined, directly or through third parties. Colorado is any written or printed communication. New York City, in particular, written description of available job promotion or transfer. Jersey City, in particular, posting or advertisement by any means, directly or through third parties. And Washington State, solicitation intended to recruit for an available position, qualifications for a specific position, directly or through third parties. Excuse me. Do the job posting requirements apply to remote positions? When recruiting for remote positions available to out-of-state applicants, which we're all very familiar with over the last few years, you will also need to comply with all states where your posting is listed. And this has been really interesting to navigate the last few years because some states, like Colorado, require remote positions to include salary information. An employer would need to include the salary range in the event that it receives applicants from this state. So if you put a nationwide job posting out there into the interwebs, you would need to abide by pay transparency laws in the event that someone from Colorado is reading that posting and feels that they can apply, which has been a really interesting thing to navigate. And Colorado is very in tune to this and has had a few lawsuits on this. So absolutely something to be paying attention to. So the bottom line, HR best practice is to disclose salary ranges in all remote job postings unless you have a very specific location requirement in a state that does not have any pay transparency laws. And I will tell you too, some of the lawsuits that Colorado was bringing was that they had some employers who had nationwide job postings were excluding Colorado only, and that was no longer allowed. They were getting called out for that. So that's not something that you can do. So if you do have, maybe you have a hub in a certain state, you want to be very specific that that job posting is only reaching people in that hub. So, as I mentioned, that list of states with pay transparency laws is growing and super fast. Here is, yet another list of some states that have recently introduced pay transparency laws. Some have now, at this point, kind of been around for a while, and certainly something to keep in mind as you're planning for the coming year. The previous slide, and we will send out the slides to everybody, shows some of those effective dates coming up for 2025. And again, your MPHR partner will be able to give you more information about the ins and outs of what each of these new states are going to be requiring. So here are some other legal considerations that I thought would be helpful just to touch upon and put on your radar as you're looking into your pay transparency practices. The first is the regulatory environment, which we've been talking about previously. Governments are implementing or considering laws related to pay equity and transparency. From what we've seen with our clients, organizations are proactively adopting pay transparency measures to comply with some of these upcoming legal requirements to avoid potential legal risks. In addition, the gender pay gap and concerns about pay inequity have gained significant attention in recent years. Pay transparency is seen as a means to address and eliminate these pay disparities based on gender and other protected characteristics. Your MPHR partner can absolutely help you with a pay gap audit and look at any pay disparities that may have developed over the years, even unintentionally. And then equal pay laws. So many jurisdictions have enacted equal pay laws that aim to eliminate pay disparities based on gender, race, and other protected characteristics. Organizations need to ensure that their pay practices are non discriminatory and meet the requirements of equal pay legislation within your jurisdiction. So I know I'm a broken record, but it's important to note again that legal requirements and compliance obligations are going to vary across jurisdictions and not just states, but there might be counties or individual cities that have different compliance obligations within their pay transparency laws. So staying up to date with relevant laws and any changes in this legislation is crucial to maintaining compliance when implementing pay transparency initiatives. So, in closing for my section, here are the things to consider when reviewing your pay transparency state or jurisdiction laws. When and how does the pay range need to be disclosed? What is the definition of a job posting or advertisement? Do the job posting requirements apply to remote positions? And do I need to describe other compensation and benefits? And now I will pass it over to my counterpart, Mary Jane.
Thank you so much, Meg. Now that Meg has told you all the important information about pay transparency compliance, you're probably saying, "Oh boy, where do I start?" I'm going to take you through the process on how to build your comp strategy, which needs to take into consideration both internal and external data. So building a compensation strategy does need to be a strategic process. If you go at it in a way that does not have is not a planned direction, or if you only look at one job at a time, you're likely to run into some challenges. So the first step of what you want to do is you want to gather information needed for your project success. And defining your compensation strategy explains the why behind the pay and creates a framework for consistency. So things you want to consider when building your framework are your company's financial position, the industry that you're in, the employment size, how many people do you employ? The business objectives that you may have, your competitiveness in the marketplace to draw in candidates or retain candidates, strategically looking at your structure. Where do you want to be within the competitive landscape? Um, for instance, if your organization is a high tech company and your primary goal is to attract top talent, in the industry, your pay philosophy may be to lead the market, which means positioning your compensation at the higher end of the pay scale. Yet, on the other hand, if you're evaluating compensation for, let's say, a warehouse or distribution type of setting where turnover's low, you're in a contained community with a large labor pool, your total reward package might be more conservative. But in contrast, A similar organization in a densely populated area with more competition for labor may need to offer higher wages to attract employees. So you do need to look at all of those different frameworks. And when you create a compensation strategy, keep in mind that that strategy that will help you throughout the life cycle of employment, because compensation is used for so many things. You're attracting employees. You also are retaining. You want to retain the employees you have, motivating employees, ensuring workplace equity, aligning compensation with organizational objectives, and also following, legal requirements. And ideally, aligning the talent needed within the organization and retaining that talent will lead to the company's overall success. So it is throughout that life cycle that this is so important, from a pay perspective. So things you want to ask yourself when you're thinking about what is our strategy? What are we going to do? First of all, you need to decide who needs to be involved in making those decisions. Um, Having different perspectives from different areas of the organization can be very, very helpful. Uh, how does the compensation strategy align with your organizational strategy? What are you trying to accomplish as an organization? What are your short and long-term goals? What does the compensation, or how does that compensation strategy align with your human capital needs? And who do you want to attract, to your business? Are you currently getting the talent you need, or are you not? What is your turnover? Keep in mind, you may have employees stating they're leaving due to compensation, being offered a higher rate someplace else, which may be very true. But there could be other reasons why employees are leaving you that you may want to analyze, that are not just compensation. And will your strategy, that you have, will it retain key talent and reward high performing employees? And as I mentioned, having a different perspective when creating the framework helps, to get buy-in from or in the structure that you create, and helps to understand regarding compensation in general. So what you'll need to do is that you'll need to, gather some information, and some of the things that you'll need to gather to, put your practice or strategy in place. First of all, are job descriptions. Job descriptions are the foundation for comparing your organizational roles to external data, to the external market. So if managers within your organization have updated those job descriptions within the past year or two, you may be in a really good position to start this project. However, if those job descriptions have not been updated for several years or don't exist at all, you may need to refresh them or start from scratch, to be able to accurately look at the market data. This process can take some time if you don't have anything in place. It may be requiring, discussions with managers and sometimes employees about what they're doing, and determining those essential functions of the job. Um, since the job description is a cornerstone in HR, they do play a critical role throughout this entire employee life cycle. And if you are on our HR services, your HR partner can help you navigate those job descriptions as well. But you're going to want to, examine both the formal and informal compensation history of your organization. It helps identify what has been effective and should be maintained. Like what do you want to keep doing, or what do you want to stop doing? Um, and for example, if a particular role that you have in the organization has experienced high turnover, higher turnover than others, you may have looked at that compensation recently and made adjustments. Um, and therefore there could be pay inequities among with incumbents, or with other roles that have comparable responsibilities. So that's something that you may find. Um, Salary surveys can definitely provide that external market data to help you create the pay structure. And looking at your current employee census information can help you see where you are directionally now. If there are gaps or inequities with your current staff, and those of you again that are on our HR services, we can help you in pulling this information, to get that census, for your current group. Um, and organizations, those of you that have several work locations, you will want to consider the impact of geography on compensation when determining your pay structures. So, second step is to look at the market for the compensation data. And compensation can definitely vary by location, geographic location, industry, the revenue of the organization, and the company size. For instance, if you have a CFO in a 50 employee company with a revenue of $1 million in Georgia, it will likely be different in salary from a CFO of 1,000 employee company with 100 million in revenue in Boston. The scope and level of responsibility can be different when when companies are larger or the revenue of the organization, is larger. That definitely can play a part in compensation. So when you're benchmarking your positions, it's very important to compare the description of the role to the data in those benchmarking tools, not the job title. For example, you could have a director or VP title within your organization, yet the description or level of responsibility within the comp data falls more into a manager title. That doesn't mean you take away the title of director or VP from your employee, as that may be very appropriate for your organization. But when searching job descriptions in a compensation tool, you need to read the description and find what best matches those responsibilities. And you'll also want to use um, you'll use the compensation tool to gather this information. And again, for those that are HR clients, you can work with us and we can help you in pulling information on different roles. But you're ultimately you're trying to find an 80% match. You're never going to find exactly, the exact description. At least that's in my experience. And it can be challenging sometimes because it's like, it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But most compensation tools, you can blend data. So you can, it could be that, it could be 3 jobs that you're blending, and you that helps you to get a more accurate view of what that compensation should be. So you will want to review your current pay rates against the data, um, and you'll want to see are there pay gaps or pay discrepancies. Um, when you're viewing your current compensation, though, if you find pay discrepancies exist between your between individuals in the same job title. um, there are you want to be sure that you're looking at people within the similar roles, but also looking across the organization where people may have similar responsibility. And if there are noticeable pay gaps, then you'll want to, look at that. Um, and if such gaps exist, what are those reasons? If factors like seniority, experience, or geographic differences don't explain the variances, you may have a potential equity issue that may need to be addressed. So now what you want to do is you want to look at and develop a pay structure. So as Meg pointed out, many states require the range on a posting for employees, if they ask. But once you establish pay ranges, um, they become a valuable tool, to your organization. They provide a clear framework for conversations with employees about ranges, promotions, and career growth. When employees ask about a pay increase, you can use the pay range to explain what skills or qualifications are needed to move to the next level. And if an employee wants a higher salary, but has already reached the top of their range, it's an opportunity to discuss, how they could advance. Um, some may be motivated to grow, while others may not, and that's okay too. Um, Pay ranges will have a min and a max with a midpoint, and often employers consider their midpoint of the salary range to be somewhere between that 25th and 75th percentile, using that 50th percentile as the mean or the mode, if you want to meet the market. And if a company's philosophy is to lead the market, you're paying at a higher rate, that salary point would most likely be above that 50 percentile, for your ranges. And the pay range um, exists to align compensation with experience and performance. So ensuring that those with less experience are in the lower end of the pay range, while more experienced employees are typically at the higher end. So they're in the same range. And then that's one thing that I know I've had questions about from clients is you wouldn't, you wouldn't necessarily create two ranges for the same role. You may have people that are in a role that are a year experience and somebody that has 20. You don't change the range based on the years of experience. The range is the range. Somebody with 20 years experience and a great performer would be at the top, would more than likely be at the top of the range. So it's still the same range. Um, and traditionally the salary range is commonly like 30 to 40% of the range. It's not, you don't have humongous ranges between the low and the high. It's usually about 30 to 40%. Um, at, top management there, it may be a little bit wider, but it's usually about that 40%. Okay. And as Meg mentioned, the range is what you reasonably, in good faith, expect to pay for a position. Okay, so at this stage in the process, an employer can look at what they're paying employees in comparison to the data they've collected. Um, and the proposed salary grades and ranges for position. The organization may need to make some adjustments, but overall, the employer can rely on the market data and its pay philosophy to set the ranges. So you don't, just because the market says a specific thing, you as a company have control over what you say those ranges are, but good to know what the market bears so where you are against that. And after the salaries for the current employees have been placed into a range, several employees will inevitably be outside of the range, right? You may find that there may be people that are red circled, and what that means is that they're above the maximum of that salary range. Which maybe you need to explore developmental opportunities to, for a promotion to the next level of position for that person, or perhaps restrict salary increases, by doing, freezing pay for that person for a time. The green circle rate are those that are below what the range is. It can also be problematic, to be below the range. And, you could provide pay increases up to at least the minimum of the range, to get the person within the range. As long as and hopefully, as long as they, I guess if they were below the range, maybe they could be performing below expectation, but still, you would want to analyze that. And again, when with anything as it relates to the range, performance, has a great deal to do of where people are within the range and seniority for sure. Now, for pay equity, obviously you want to, make sure that the pay is based on job responsibilities, um, the market standards and objective criteria to ensure employees are feeling valued and motivated, as Meg mentioned. And you should identify and address any wage gaps to ensure compensation is not influenced by factors like gender, race, or age. And employees should be compensated based on their skills, their experience, measurable performance to encourage growth and retention. And the business must adhere to federal and state regulations to avoid any legal risk and ensure fair compensation practices. So next steps is to implement and evaluate the new pay structure. So you'll want to determine when are you going to put this structure in place? What is the effective date, and to prepare and plan accordingly. And also you'll want to decide who is responsible, for each part of this process. Who will be involved? Will it be managers, HR, payroll? Um, what tasks need to be completed, and who would be taking the lead? Um, Clearly identifying the roles ensures that everyone knows what is expected of them, and clearly defining what is expected also equips managers to be transparent with their team. Strong communication is so key in making this process smooth and effective. And you know your communication plan, as I mentioned earlier too, you do want to involve, you know, I think you do want to involve managers, to so that they understand and can explain how compensation is handled moving forward. Um, and it should include your entire HR team, right? From recruiting to payroll, so that they understand and can ensure that everyone understands all decisions must align with the established structure. And from my experience, when everyone isn't on the same page, a manager may make a decision or promise something that's outside of those approved ranges, and that can cause issues, internally. So change management does require a clear strategy, and how you set the stage is critical. So be transparent. And evaluating the new pay structure, again, the best practice is to review your compensation structure annually. You might adjust that timing a bit, but if there are changes like if there's changes within your organizations, you may do that more frequently, or if there's a shift in your strategy, you may do it more frequently than a year. That could also impact what you think about your pay structure. But don't get caught off guard and fall behind. Like Meg was saying, if you haven't looked at it in a while, or you've increased someone, and things are going to get out of whack. And while you may not make changes every year, it's important to evaluate it each year. So an effective compensation philosophy should pass these quality tests. So is the program equitable? Is it defensible and is perceived as fair? As Meg mentioned, that perception is so critical, internally. Is it fiscally sensible? Or is it something that it makes sense within the organization? Are they are the programs included in a compensation philosophy and policy legally compliant? Are you following the laws within your state? Can the organization effectively articulate the philosophy and policy in overall all programs? Is there a reason behind the way in which you're doing things? Are the programs the organization offers fair, competitive, in line with compensation philosophies and policies? So to make sure, you are going to want to make sure that you review your jurisdictions. As Meg said, these laws are passing in many, many areas. So you will want to make sure that where you are, in the states that you are in and or jurisdictions that you are following those laws. And you'll want to know when and how you need to disclose that compensation range and or benefits, as Meg mentioned. And are there other, requirements on the job posting? Another example in Indiana, for instance, employers need to inform a prospective employee about smoking restrictions at the time of application. So it's important to understand what you need to do in that interviewing, process, and also what exactly needs to go on a job posting and what is a job posting. And what about those remote positions and any other specific regulations that you need to consider. So again, some tips and tricks, employers with locations in multiple states should stay up to date on new and pending legislation, and additionally be mindful of the differences between the laws, what you have to disclose, at what point in the hiring process do you have to disclose it? What do you have to disclose, to the external candidate to versus your internal, people, and when? um, and consider whether you should implement state-specific practices or just create a nationwide policy to comply with the most restrictive. So, especially if you are in some of those more restrictive states. And as Meg said, don't dodge the law. Even though all states don't have the transparency law, avoiding those places that do likely isn't the answer. Like Meg mentioned, a number of companies, have attempted to exclude Colorado when hiring remote employees, but it has definitely sparked an uproar. So, not best not to do that. And also, again, and I know that Meg mentioned it as too, there are more and more applicants that are looking for that information. People definitely have not won't apply for a job if they don't know what the compensation is. Um, and, which jobs do you are hiring frequently for in what states? That's something to keep in mind, as you're looking at your comp. But as I mentioned before, make sure you look at it all holistically. And employers should be training their HR staff, their managers, and others who are interviewing applicants to make sure they're aware of the complying with these laws, particularly in jurisdictions where employers only are required to disclose pay upon applicant's request. Um, but be sure people are informed, and help those managers, to navigate these questions that are going to come their way. Because people are going to go to their managers when the laws have gone in effect in their states, because the impact of the law could have a, an effect on your culture, as it relates to transparency. So you want them to be ready. And, you know, do employees know how salary ranges are set and how their compensation is determined now? Um, Employees will quickly note how their salaries compare to an advertised range, and they will ask questions. So again, help your managers to navigate that. Um, so that they can interpret and discuss those ranges that are shared, and be prepared to explain why employees are positioned where they are in the range. Frame employee specific compensation discussions with your foundational job and pay structures. So it can be very helpful to have that in place. Um, and again, along with the rise of transparency laws, employers may see an increase in discrimination litigation based on inequity pay. So employers should be proactive and consider implementing routine audits in their pay practices and compensation structures to identify any potential areas of, of inequity and work through to rectify them instead of discovering them for the first time in a lawsuit. That would not be fun. So let's talk about some frequently asked questions.
All right, I'll jump back in. Thank you,
Great.
Mary Jane. That was really informative. But to start some frequently asked questions, these have come up within our clients, so we thought we'd kind of get ahead of them and ask them here today. So, can I have a broad national range that encompasses different geographic differentials?
So for a physical location, probably not. The requirement is that you post the range that you reasonably expect to pay for a position. So you need to post that reasonable range. However, let's say you're posting for a remote position and you aren't sure where it's going to be performed because it could reasonably be performed anywhere in the country. You may have a bit more wiggle room there, but if you have any pay differentials based on geography, you may want to consider adding that in the posting or advertisement as a disclaimer.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I've certainly noticed an uptick in that in especially in the last year or two where I've
Hmm.
seen postings on, say LinkedIn, and at the bottom it says for California applicants, for
Hmm.
Colorado applicants. And they certainly are starting to break those out.
Absolutely. Yeah. Excellent. Well, so Meg, can
Mhm.
I offer a salary above or below the posted range?
So keep in mind that these pay ranges are established in, just like you mentioned in your section, are established in good faith based upon what you reasonably believe you might pay. So with that, I'd say there is some wiggle room. Certainly, if you're going to be paying someone above the range, that's obviously
Hmm.
preferred. Below the range might be a bit more of a challenge and certainly could cause you to have a dissatisfied employee on your hands. So I'd be careful with that one and just make sure you have enough levels to accommodate someone who needs to be in a lower range with less experience. Is actually might actually just be a better fit for a different role or an entirely different job level.
Hmm. Good point. Yeah, because sometimes I know that people have interviewed someone and they're not exactly what they
Hmm.
anticipated, but they're like, hey, you know what? They don't have the experience for this job, but they do have experience that maybe, and you want to be very clear with the applicant if you are going to do that, right, Meg? You
Yes.
don't want to say to someone, oh, by the way, we're not going to offer you the range that's
Yeah.
on here, you know. But if there is, you don't meet the qualifications of this role, but we
Hmm.
have this other role that we might like to consider you for, and this is the range on that role. So, you don't want to do a bait and switch kind of thing, but it does happen. I know, in my experience of interviewing candidates through the years, is you interview somebody and you're like, oh man, they don't fit this role, but you know what? They could
They're
do X,
great.
Y, and Z and they'd great.
Yeah.
Or, so you do, again, but again, transparency, just be clear,
Hmm.
with
Hmm.
that.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
So I only have one employee in the jurisdiction. Do I have to disclose pay information?
Love, a typical HR answer. It depends. You really need to look at the jurisdiction requirements. Generally, these types of remote positions, if you have one person in one jurisdiction, that has a requirement, you do have to comply. So you really need to look at that, what's going on there.
For sure. And as we
Hmm.
know with most of these kind of .gov websites that we
Yep.
look at almost every day,
Yep.
sometimes it's not super clear. So you'll want to
Hmm.
make sure you're really reading through the law itself with a fine-tooth comb.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, um, Meg, is the pay range only required on job postings, or do we need to post or provide pay scales to all employees?
So, as we talked about in the beginning, this is also going to be dependent on the jurisdiction. So, each location has a bit of a nuanced definition around the term job posting, like we talked about. It doesn't always mean your Indeed advertisement. So, you really want to dig into what those requirements are for your area to ensure compliance. I know we are absolutely a broken record on that today, but you really do need to go through the specific requirements with that fine-tooth comb. So while some states require it solely at time of hire, other states are going to require it to be shared at the time of a position transfer, or others are
Mhm.
going to require that you provide it upon request. So it really is going to depend.
Mhm. I
I
know.
hate to
Love
say
the
it
peds.
again,
Yeah.
but again, for MPHR services clients, absolutely reach out to your HR partner, and we can certainly point you in the right direction in terms of what your specific requirements are. We have gone through all the laws with a fine-tooth comb, so we are happy to help advise and offer direction.
Right.
Excellent. So, Lauren, we'll pass
Excellent.
it back to you.
Awesome. So we do have one open question. Uh, can you use one salary range for a couple different positions? For example, personal banker one and personal banker two share the same range. However, personal banker ones would be the lower mid end of the range, and personal banker twos would be the mid higher end of the range.
Uh,
Very
Meg,
good
feel free to
question.
jump in too. That is a good
Hmm.
question. I guess what I would if if the level one, my concern for you would be, is there a distinction, not just money, but is there a distinction of what level one person does versus level two? Because if not, if they do the exact same thing, it's just that the level two, they've advanced in number of years of experience and have, just have been with you longer. I would be cautious because at the level one, if the people are really doing the same work, then the level one person could say, I'm doing the same thing as level two. I'm just not being paid for it. So if they are doing the exact same work, I would suggest you have a range for the role, unless there is some distinction. Meg, what do you like? If there's something different that they're doing, it may be a different role.
Yeah, I agree. I think, if you have the ones versus twos, definitely diving in a little bit more to see what those differences are. Are twos getting higher level clients? Are they
Hmm.
working with higher level clients, more complicated clients, larger clients, things like that? Then, that's a distinction
It
between
might
those
be a
two
distinction,
roles.
right?
You might need
Hmm.
more experience in order to do that. Maybe you need a certification in order to work with that client. Then I think what you would want to do is split that. So you would, and
Hmm.
even because if a I'm sorry, if a two is never going to be making that lower side of the range, then maybe just create, even if it's you're pushing the higher end up a little bit more, or whatever that looks like, creating
Right.
two separate ranges for each of those roles would be, I think, in your best interest. You also, when we talk about kind of those communication plans and where transparency is going to bring up a lot of questions for employees and managers, what you could end up with too is some engagement issues, satisfaction issues, where you're seeing these ones always asking, why am I never getting to the higher end of this range? Or I have so much
Hmm.
experience, why am I never getting there? You may end up in a lot of just a lot more questions about it,
Hmm.
because there's this like top end of a range that actually is not accessible. So I
Hmm.
think, it would be in your best interest to create a range for each of those roles separately.
Hmm.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm going to squeeze in one more question before our time is up. It is extremely unlikely someone will reach the max of our salary band, requires over 32 years of external experience in some cases. Are we required to post the full salary range? We are often only posting the minimum to mid range of the salary band, as that's where most applicants fall.
Hmm.
That's a good question.
That is a good question.
Technically, based on
Hmm.
how the laws read, you are supposed to be posting what you'd reasonably expect to pay for the role. Similar to my answer on the previous one too, by having the larger end of that range for that role, you end up with a lot of questions. And you may be dealing with that question then every single time. Well, why, how do I get to the top of that range? What does that,
Hmm.
how do I get there? So in some ways you could break it down just like we were previously talking about, and this is what we're seeing with a lot of our clients is they are starting to break out roles into different levels and more levels. So you could have I don't know what the role is
Yeah.
specifically that you're referring to, but maybe you do have a new level of role. If somebody comes in with that many years of experience, you probably are going to give them higher level clients or you are going to give them higher level work. So maybe that is more of a senior level role that has a range more on that top end up there. So maybe it does look at kind of breaking out that very big range into multiple different positions.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, just to drive home, make sure there is a distinction
Hmm.
between them. You want to make sure there's a distinction, you know, yeah, because if, as I had mentioned in my section, the VAT or the range is typically 30% from the low to the high, right? 30 to 40 at most. So if your range is way bigger than that,
Hmm.
then you need to look at what's going on, because it wouldn't be that broad. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
All right. I know we're at the top of the hour, but we had one more question come through. Are you guys able to field this?
Yes.
we can
All
try.
righty. All right. So, thoughts on basing merit increases as a percentage of the midpoint of the range in order to try to ensure pay equity?
A percentage of the
I know.
midpoint.
Just working through um, yes, you certainly can. That's pretty common where merit increases, maybe they'll say, it's 5%. I see, of the midpoint.
Mm.
I
So
haven't seen that done.
yeah, I haven't seen that specifically done. Although, from a compa ratio, if
Mm,
that's what you're referring to,
mm-hmm.
doing compa ratios, can see where it's from a pay equity perspective too, right, Meg? So,
Yeah,
you're seeing where people fall within
right.
the range. There's that. I guess it depends on, what's people get as far as merit is concerned, or, percentages based on performance and things like that. But also, if you've done some analysis and realize that, individual A is they're not they really are out of whack, with
Yeah.
where they are in the range, you may end up giving them a higher percentage to get them more aligned with where they should be, because they're out of range from a pay equity
Right.
standpoint. And that's really something that, and again, when Massachusetts first went in, started this pay equity law, this is obviously an extension of it that's going into effect this year. But that is something that you do want to audit and realize, oh geez, if you're hiring for a new role and you've got somebody that you're paying them way more than an incumbent, and it's just over time that person has only gotten, 2-3% because of
Hmm.
whatever, it's like, man, the internal person has as much experience as the external, but they're making less,
Right.
and you bring this new person in, you need to put a plan in place to get that person up. And so, in that process of those reviews or those increases each year, you may decide that this, individual A, we're going to give them an extra percentage each year or whatever it might be to get them in line, with compensation.
Yeah, absolutely. And to kind of, I'm just thinking through that question a little bit more too about basing the merit increases on the median, the middle point there, instead of people's actual compensation number. You may also end up in an engagement issue too. I'm just trying to, again, just trying to think more broadly about it and poke some
Hmm.
holes in it. If you have people who are at the top of the range, say, and their merit increase is based on the middle, or you have people at the very
Mm,
bottom of the range and their increase is based on the middle. You have the people at the bottom of the range who are actually receiving what could be perceived as a better merit increase because it's
hmm.
higher than the salary they're actually making. Or on the flip side, you have the people at the higher end of the range who are making an increase based on the median, and that's actually lower than what their compensation is. So you kind of might end up in this interesting engagement satisfaction issue with that
Mm,
practice, just from
hmm.
the perception of it and what that then looks like where people feel like they're not getting as much, or some people are getting more than what they are making. So that's an interesting question, though, something to think about.
Mm-hmm.
All right, one last one came in. If your employees are compensated mostly by commissions earned, how would you set bands around that?
That is, yeah, that's interesting. With commission, you would want to be sure, excuse me, you'd want to be sure that the structure is such, let's say it's a base plus commission, you want to make sure the base is, it, I guess you want to make sure that people have the same opportunity to make, commission. Like you're not saying employee A, you only get 5%, and employee B, oh, we're going to give you 10%. Like you want, and people may make, if you have the same opportunity to make those commissions, then it would be, even though I might make more because I sold more, that's still equitable. Do you have anything to add to that, Meg?
Yeah, the only thing being that, they are, well, I guess it's going to depend, it's going to depend as with these things. So, is
Right.
this position 100% commission,
Percent
which
commission,
is
right.
pretty rare.
Yeah.
But if that is, then you're going to need to put like an estimated range. And you may want to look at kind of previous people within that role, create that estimated range for this
Mm,
position. For those who are have maybe some salary and then it's commission on top, then, you are going to be posting that salary range that that person
right.
has, with maybe some of that similar information about here's kind of the estimated compensation that, or commission that somebody might receive within this job level. So that would be kind of two different ways to think about it when needing to post for commission type roles, and obviously dependent on the specific scenario.
All right, thank you, Meg and Mary Jane. To learn
You
more
bet.
about MPHR services, visit our website at mp-hr.com. Be sure to join us for our upcoming webinar, The ROI of Training, Building High-Performing Teams and Leaders. To register and to see the full calendar of upcoming events and available resources, visit our website. We will be sending out a recording of today's webinar with the presentation slides by tomorrow afternoon. Thank you for joining us and have a terrific day.